your dreams.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video, and today I want to talk about this Tower Fantasy reboot that is happening. By the way, if you haven't liked the content, just leave a like and subscribe. So I have been hearing rumors about Tower Fantasy getting a reboot, and I just thought they were rumors. I just thought these were just people coping about Tower Fantasy getting a reboot, but apparently it is happening. Because right now on Bilibili.com, which is basically like the Chinese YouTube kind of, Hotta Studios are doing a survey that's lasting from November something to December something. The survey is basically about how they can improve the Tower Fantasy once they reboot it. I don't know if this reboot is going to be called Tower Fantasy 2 or if it's going to be called a different name. We don't know too much about this. I do find this intriguing because Tower Fantasy is only 1 year old and Hotta Studios are basically already going to reboot this series. The fact that they're rebooting the series probably tells me that Hotta Studios have finally opened their eyes and have realized that Tower Fantasy is basically dying. I've been saying this for quite some time, kind of, and I'm not saying this to be mean, I'm not trying to be harsh, but the truth is really there, right? This game is dying. Their Twitter and their Reddit and their other social medias barely get any interaction. Last month, the game made only like $600,000, which isn't very good for an open world 3D MMO. Granted, we don't know what the PC sales are like. We don't know what the CN sales are like. But as I said earlier, the fact that they're rebooting the series when the game is only a year old basically says that, you know, this is how they're gonna save the game. They gotta reboot the game because it's fucking dying. Tower Fantasy is still technically like a toddler at this point, and they're already rebooting the series. I don't know if the current whales that are in Tower Fantasy are able to transfer their account, or if they gotta, you know, restart all over again. Hotta Studios better listen to the players on the player feedback on their survey, otherwise it's going to be another shit rolling down the hill all over again. The game had a pretty big launch, but it just slowly went to shit because their game was just very glitchy and laggy. There were already hackers in the game basically fucking up, you know, the community by hacking the game. Players could get their shit stolen just for having another player being in their party. The game was so full of glitches when it shouldn't have had any glitches to begin with, because the CN server already went through that phase, so why would the global server even have that problem? The game had pretty bad power creep, not to mention the 4 stars in the game are also pretty bad. I don't think they ever released any new 4-star characters. Anyways, for this reboot of the series, they should, you know, fix out all the glitches and shit. They should make the waifus hotter, maybe take some inspiration from Genshin Impact. I said inspiration, they shouldn't just copy and take from Genshin Impact, but just have some inspiration from Genshin Impact. Try to make the game free-to-play friendly. The power creep in Tower Fantasy is pretty bad. Also, the multiplayer aspect of it was also kind of bad too. In fact, it doesn't even feel like an MMO like half the time because there was really not many people there. I think the issue with it was because there was just like so many channels and shit. But the multiplayer aspect of it just felt really dead. It just didn't feel like there were that many people on. And the fact that they didn't add cross compatibility with the PlayStation release was basically just a shot in the face there. Also, the story in Tower Fantasy was just kind of bad. I don't know if it got better like later on, but the first part of the story just felt really rushed. The concept was interesting, but it just felt rushed to me. Also, not many playable characters were really part of the first part of the story, which felt kind of weird. I don't know, the characters in Tower Fantasy just felt out of place. They weren't really there in the story at all. I think they kind of show up like later on, but like in the beginning part of the game, the characters hardly like showed up. There could be other things that I could list, but I can't really think of them right now at the moment. Anyways, I don't know how well this reboot is going to be. Obviously, it's going to really depend on how Hotta Studios does this. Worst case scenario, they completely ignored the survey because the survey was just there for marketing purposes. They end up in another plagiarism scandal because they plagiarized from Wuthering Waves or Zenless Zone Zero or Mugen if those games come out before this reboot. And then they just end up in another shithole all over again, really. My biggest question though is how are they really going to market this reboot? Because this game is already out. Calling it Tower Fantasy 2, I mean, I don't know if they will call it that, but I don't know. You know, calling it Tower Fantasy 2 just seems kind of odd, especially since this game's only been out for like a year already. I don't know if, like, you know, because of this announcement of this Tower Fantasy reboot, players might not even touch the current Tower of Fantasy. I'm very curious to know how the fuck are they gonna market this, because as of right now the game is technically dying, right? Because the fact that they're announcing this reboot basically says that the game is dying, right? They have no other choice but to reboot it. Some people might cope and be like, oh, it's not dying, they're just doing it because, you know, they want to renew it and shit. Just face the music. The game's only been out for a year already, and they're already announcing a reboot of the series because the game is dying. Typically reboot a series when the series has run long enough, or if the series is doing very bad, you kind of have no choice but to, you know, redo the thing. I'm just so curious to know how the fuck are they gonna market this, because if they do call it TOF2, would that actually bring back old players? If nobody liked TOF1, why would anyone play TOF2? They might just end up rebranding the series and just call it something entirely different. Anyways, I know I talk a lot of shit about this game. It's not like I want to, but just face the music. The game is kind of bad. I do hope this reboot does become successful. Hopefully Hotta Studios has learned from their mistakes and actually take this seriously. They should definitely take their time with this and listen to the player feedback. Otherwise, they'll just end up in another shitty swamp. Anyways, that's going to be the end of this video. Let me know what you guys think. Are you curious about this Tower Fantasy reboot? Are you going to play this reboot, especially if they call it Tower Fantasy 2? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys later.
Bye-bye now. Come again soon.